Commander Ethan Cole stepped out of his exploration pod and looked around in silence. The air was soft and cold, and the strange forest around him seemed alive with light. Every leaf shimmered like crystal, and thin vines glowed gently under the silver light of the moon above. He had landed on the small forest moon called Kira 7, far from any known colony. His mission was simple: to collect soil samples and record signs of life. Yet as he stood there, he felt the air watching him back. He walked slowly through the trees, his boots sinking slightly into the moss. His scanner beeped now and then, showing strong energy signs nearby. He thought it might be some mineral pocket, but when he looked closer, the readings moved. That meant it was alive. He turned his head carefully, scanning the shadows. Nothing. Only silence and soft mist. Then he heard it, a small, shaking voice from behind a fern. "Please don't eat me, human." Ethan froze where he stood. His hand went to his helmet instinctively, but then he stopped. That voice sounded terrified. Slowly he turned toward the sound. From behind the glowing plants, a tiny figure stepped out. She was no taller than his knee, a small alien woman with silver hair and pale pink skin that caught the moonlight. Her eyes were wide, shining like liquid glass. She held a small broken branch like a spear, her hands trembling. Her body was thin, her steps unsure. Ethan had never seen a species like her. She looked more like a frightened child than a threat. He raised his hands gently, showing he carried no weapon. "Hey, it's all right. I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. His voice came through his suit's speaker, calm and steady. "My name's Ethan. I'm an explorer." The small alien didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on him. "Humans destroy worlds," she said through the translator device on her neck. Her voice was full of fear. "My people saw your ships burn the sky. You come, you take, you leave, only fire. Please don't take me away." Ethan's heart sank. He understood now. Her people must have seen the wars from long ago, the battles fought by human fleets. To them, humans were not explorers. They were monsters of metal and flame. He knelt down slowly until his face was close to her level. Then carefully he pressed a button on his helmet. The visor opened, revealing his face. The cool air touched his skin, and the little alien gasped softly, surprised to see eyes that looked almost kind. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," he said. "I came to learn." For a long time she said nothing. Only the faint sound of wind moved between them. Finally she whispered, "Why would you learn from us? We have nothing left. What's your name?" Ethan asked gently. She hesitated. "Lyra, Lyra," he repeated, smiling slightly. "That's a beautiful name." Her eyes blinked with confusion. No one had called her beautiful in a long time. She lowered the broken branch. "You don't sound like the stories." Ethan tilted his head. "What stories?" "The stories that say humans eat the weak, steal the water, and burn the stars." He gave a quiet laugh, though it carried a sadness inside. "I guess stories travel faster than truth." Lyra looked away. "Maybe." He opened a small kit from his belt and took out a packet of food. "Here, it's safe." He broke a piece and placed it on a rock between them. She watched carefully as if expecting a trick. When he ate his piece first, she finally reached out, sniffed it, and took a tiny bite. Her expression softened. It was sweet, warm, gentle. They sat together beside a small stream, the silence slowly turning into trust. Ethan used his translator to learn her words, and she listened to him describe the stars. Lyra told him her people had once lived across the valley, building houses in the trees and singing to the moons at night. But then a storm of fire had come from the sky, a meteor storm that burned their forests and poisoned the ground. She had hidden in the caves for months, the only one who survived. As she spoke, Ethan felt something twist inside him. He had seen destroyed worlds before, but hearing it from her made it real. He looked at her small face, the tired eyes, the soft hair catching the light. She had lost everything, yet she still had the courage to speak to the creature she feared most. When the night grew colder, Ethan built a small fire using his portable generator. The orange light flickered across the glassy trees, casting long shadows. Lyra stayed a few feet away at first, watching every move he made. When he placed a soft blanket beside her, she hesitated again. Then slowly she stepped closer and wrapped herself in it. The translator caught her whisper, translating it into a trembling human voice. "Warm. Like kindness," Ethan smiled. "That's what warmth is meant to feel like." For the first time since he met her, she looked at him without fear. Her shoulders relaxed. Her hands stopped shaking. She sat near him close enough that the firelight touched her skin. They talked until the night was deep and quiet. Ethan told her about Earth, the blue oceans, the rain, the sound of wind through trees that weren't made of glass. She listened with wide eyes, her small heart beginning to trust the giant beside her. Then, without warning, a sharp sound broke the peace. A low boom rolled across the forest, followed by a flash of red light. The ground trembled. Ethan stood at once, his instincts kicking in. That was no storm. That was a signal. He looked toward the sky and saw a red glow cutting through the clouds. His ship's distress beacon had activated automatically. Something big had entered the moon's orbit. Lyra gasped and stumbled back, clutching the blanket. "They came back," she whispered, her voice full of terror. Ethan turned to her. "Who came back?" Her small hands pointed toward the dark sky. "The machines. The ones that took everything. They'll see your fire. They'll see us." Ethan quickly packed his equipment. "Listen to me," he said, kneeling to her level. "We need to move now. I'll keep you safe, I promise." She looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. "Why would a human protect me?" "Because you deserve to live," he said simply. A strange wind blew through the forest, shaking the crystal trees. Above them a shape moved, a dark figure against the red clouds, huge and silent. It passed across the moonlight, casting a shadow over the land. Ethan grabbed his rifle and motioned for Lyra to follow. She ran beside him, her small steps fast and frightened. The sound of engines echoed from the distance. They reached a rocky clearing where the stars were brighter. Ethan looked up and saw them. 3 black machines descending through the sky, their red lights glowing like eyes. Lyra whispered. They were built by the Skyburners. He understood now. The Harvesters, old military drones left from an ancient war. They had gone rogue, spreading across forgotten worlds, feeding on energy and life alike. Ethan's voice was calm but sharp. "Stay behind me." The forest filled with the hum of engines. Blue lightning flickered between the trees as the machines scanned the ground. Lyra gripped his leg tightly, her body trembling again. Ethan raised his weapon, eyes steady. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. As the red light of the first harvester beam touched the clearing, he took aim. The air filled with the sound of power charging and leaves burning. Lyra hid behind him, her eyes squeezed shut. She thought she would die, but instead she heard something else. The sound of a human heart standing firm against the storm. The ground shook harder, and the sky grew darker. The machines were coming closer. The tiny alien woman clung to the only being who had shown her mercy. And the human, tall and unbroken, faced the darkness without fear. The ground shook again, harder this time. Commander Ethan Cole looked up through the glowing branches and saw the machines descending like metal spiders from the sky. Each one had 6 sharp legs and a round body that flashed red with scanning lights. The air around them vibrated with energy. Lyra hid behind a tree, holding the blanket he had given her, her small frame trembling in fear. Ethan pressed a button on his wrist, opening a link to his ship. "Aurora 3, defensive mode now," he ordered. The ship's system answered with a deep hum, sending small drones into the air that began forming a glowing blue shield above the clearing. The first harvester landed with a heavy crash. Dust and sparks flew everywhere. Its metal claws dug into the ground as it turned its head toward Ethan. Its red sensor glowed brighter, locking onto his movement. "Lyra, stay down," he shouted. The harvester fired a beam of energy that tore through the trees, sending shards of glowing bark flying in every direction. Ethan dove behind a rock, raised his rifle, and fired back. A streak of blue light hit the harvester's chest, breaking through part of its armor. It screamed, a strange mechanical sound that echoed across the valley. Lyra covered her ears and pressed her face into the ground. She had seen these monsters before. They had destroyed her people's homes, their gardens, and their songs. She never imagined she would face them again, and certainly not beside a human. Another machine dropped from the sky, then another, 3 in total. They surrounded the clearing, their red eyes moving slowly, hunting for life. Ethan's drones flew in tight formation, shooting beams of light that clashed against the machine's armor. The forest lit up with flashes of blue and red. Every time one of the drones was hit, it fell like a dying star, burning out in silence. Ethan breathed hard but stayed calm. Come on, he whispered to himself. You've handled worse. He rolled out from behind the rock and fired again. His shots were clean, controlled. Each blast struck with precision, knocking off plates of metal and exposing wires that sparked and hissed. But the harvesters were relentless. One of them raised its leg and brought it down hard, sending a shockwave through the ground. Ethan lost balance and fell, sliding across the dirt. Lyra screamed his name. She ran to him without thinking, though. Her steps were small and weak compared to the heavy shaking of the ground. Ethan looked up just in time to see one of the machines lowering its weapon toward her. He jumped forward, shielding her with his body. The blast struck his armor, throwing him back into a fallen tree. The sound rang through the forest like thunder. His armor smoked and his breathing grew uneven. Lyra rushed to him, tears forming in her large silver eyes. You saved me again, she whispered. Why? Ethan coughed, his face pale under the broken helmet. Because that's what humans are supposed to do. He looked at her small face and smiled weakly. We don't eat life, Lyra. We protect it. The harvesters drew closer, their heavy legs crashing through the glassy trees. Ethan tried to stand, but his leg armor was damaged. He looked toward the wrecked drones. Only one was still flying, glowing faintly. He reached for his communicator. Aurora 3, activate pulse defense. Code 69 Delta. The ship responded with a long tone. The remaining drone blinked 3 times and flew high above the trees. Lyra looked up, confused. What is it doing? Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. Ending this. The drone released a small device that floated above them. A soft hum filled the air. Then, with a blinding flash, a pulse wave spread across the forest. The energy swept through everything, trees, rocks, and machines. The harvesters froze mid-step. Their red eyes flickered and then went dark. One by one, they fell to the ground, their bodies smoking as the light inside them died out. Silence returned, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the sound of falling leaves. Lyra stood still for a long time, her blanket glowing faintly from the light of the dying machines. She turned slowly toward Ethan. He was lying against the tree, his eyes half closed, his breathing rough. She ran to him and knelt beside him. Ethan, stay with me, she said, her small hands pressing against his chest plate. He looked at her and gave a faint smile. You're safe now. That's all that matters. No, she said firmly, shaking her head. You saved my life twice. You can't leave me. He reached up weakly and touched her hand with his gloved fingers. I won't. I just need rest. Lyra looked around the clearing. The machines lay silent and still, their bodies already being covered by the silver mist that moved through the forest. The trees, once broken, began glowing again. Slowly, life was returning to Kira 7. When dawn finally came, the sunlight poured over the hills, turning everything gold. Lyra stayed beside Ethan all night, watching over him as he slept. She whispered soft songs in her language, songs that once belonged to her lost people. The translator translated a few words, but most were beyond its reach. They sounded like music made of hope. When Ethan woke, the first thing he saw was her face. Her small eyes were full of light. You're alive, she said softly. Thanks to you, he replied, sitting up slowly. She shook her head. No. Thanks to you, my world still has a dawn. He smiled and looked around. We'll send a signal. My team can help rebuild. There's a future here, Lyra. For you. For others like you. She stared at him in surprise. You would help us? Of course, he said. It's what we should have done long ago. For a while they sat in silence, watching the sunrise through the glass trees. The air smelled fresh again. The river below sparkled in the light. The forest that had once been filled with fear now felt like the beginning of something new. When the rescue ship finally arrived, the other humans stepped out carefully, their eyes wide at the sight of the small alien standing beside their commander. They had never seen anyone like her. Lyra stood proudly, holding Ethan's hand. This is Lyra, Ethan said. She's not a threat. She's a survivor. The crew nodded respectfully, understanding the weight of his words. One of them offered Lyra a small piece of food, the same kind Ethan had shared with her on the first night. She smiled faintly and accepted it. Before they left the clearing, Lyra looked up at Ethan. "When I first saw you, I thought you came to destroy me. And now?" he asked gently. She smiled, a soft, honest smile that reached her eyes. "Now, I know you came to bring back life." He looked down at her, the corners of his lips lifting into a tired but warm smile. "Then I guess we both learned something." She nodded. "I learned humans can be kind." "And I learned," he said, looking out over the shining forest, "that even the smallest voice can change how we see the universe." As they walked toward the waiting ship, Lyra looked back one last time at her world. The ruins of her old village were far beyond the trees, but she no longer felt alone. The fear that had lived in her heart since the day the fire fell was gone. In its place was a quiet strength. Ethan turned to her. "Ready to go?" She took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, but promise me something." "Anything." "Don't let your people forget us," she said. "Don't let them forget that kindness is stronger than power." Ethan placed his hand gently over his heart. "I promise." As the ship rose into the sky, the sunlight caught the forest below, making it look like a sea of gold. Lyra pressed her small hand against the window, watching her home fade beneath the clouds. Beside her, Ethan looked at the stars and thought about how one frightened voice had reminded him what humanity truly meant. And somewhere in that silent corner of space, two hearts, one human and one alien, carried the same hope. That one day, stories would no longer begin with fear but with trust. The legends that spread later across the galaxy would tell of a human who came to a dying world and met a tiny woman who once whispered, "Please don't eat me." But in the end, it wasn't fear that survived. It was the truth she found. That humans could be protectors, and that kindness could light even the darkest corner of the stars.